This is our mask that we're making. It has a pocket and it is lined. You can do a double thickness or single thickness, whichever you prefer. We do the double because it just gives it a little more safety factor to it. The thicker it is, then the less germs that can get through it. So the only thing that you're going to need then, if you make them like ours, is the liner material, the regular material, and elastic. Now if you can't get elastic, you can always use ties, because I know elastic is a premium right now. You can get ties and use the ties. We cut them and then we just sew them in on both ends. That just makes it a little harder to adjust them if somebody doesn't, if it's a little too loose on them.
Hair ties.
Oh, I'm sorry, these are hair ties. So to begin with, what I do is I take my liner fabric, which I'm using all 100% cotton. You can use whatever you want to use. I've heard different things about cotton polyester, that it should be a blend, it should be all cotton. There's so many different things out there. We decided to use all cotton, so we're using 100% cotton, which is a little bit cheaper too because you can get the quilting cottons. This is a linen and it's 100% cotton, and I'm using white as my liners. And the first thing I did with all of my materials was I pressed them off because it helps to flatten it out. This one is not pressed, as you can see, but I'm just going to use it now for purposes here. I've used a little piece of cardboard to help me with getting my masks kind of square. So I know my edge here is very square, so I can put the cardboard up against the edge, and then I can mark along the line to make sure that it is straight. Now, that way it helps me to start with a nice 90-degree angle here. You'll need some rulers to help you with it and to measure things. I use a standard pattern, which is a 9.5 by 13 inches. So I measure out my material. I do 9.5. Nine and a half. And then I mark it on the pattern here. Now my 13-inch, this is the 9.5 distance. My 13-inch is what's going to make this. I have found that using a 1/2 inch smaller, making the lining material a 1/2 inch smaller, helps me when I'm folding, and you'll see that a little bit later. So on this one, I'm going to do, from my line that I made here, 12.5 inches. And that was just from trial and error. We found out that it was just a little easier to fold if we did that. Now I'll usually cut 3 or 4, whatever I need, but I'm gonna just, for your sake, just do the one. You wanna try to cut as straight as you can, which I'm not doing such a good job today, but as straight as you can so that the next pattern then will come out and you don't have to remark it. Okay, so now this was on the fold, so I'm just going to take and cut down the fold on this one. So this now gives me 2 liners. Then I'm going to take my material. I found that in buying this material, one of the things that I didn't like is the manufacturers are putting these big borders on them. So I repressed my material. This was pressed. I repressed it and moved my edge over so that I can cut this off, because we're only doing little 1/4 inch seams, so if you have all that on there, then it's going to show. So again, I start with my, and in this one I need the white pencil. I start again with measuring my 9 1/2. Nine and a half, and again, this is the piece that goes across the width of the mouth. And then on this one, then I'm going to make it the full length and do the 13 inches. Now I pretty much knew that this edge was square because I have been already cut some patterns out of this one to make. So I didn't have to do the paper to make sure the edge was square, that I was doing a 9-degree angle. Okay, so there's my material for the mask. So I have one piece of the material that I want on the outside, and if I can get them apart here. Oh, again, I used a corner. Cut this. And one of the liners.
Explain why you had that extra piece.
These are, when you cut 2, you have 2 extra pieces. You have 1 liner and 1 for the mask. So when you cut it and the material's folded in half, you have 2 pieces, and you can make 2 out of that fold. So I take this wrong side up and put the liner on the wrong side. Kind of try to match it up a little bit, with a little bit on each end so that you can get that in. And then I take my pins, and you're going to put a little bit of a hem in here. Only about 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch wide. You don't need a lot. And this is why I cut it a little bit shorter. It makes this a little easier to fold under when the liner is just a little bit shorter. Make sure you tuck all that in under there. And you want to get that all done, and then you want to flip it around and then do the other side. This, if you're only doing one thickness, then you're not using the liner. You can pretty much do this as you're sewing. You may not have to pin it. I found that pinning it with the two pieces was easier because it just was too much on the machine to try to get it even and come out without having it all pinned first. But depending on how good of a sewer you are, you may not need to pin. Okay, so that's the next step. Next step, we have to go to the iron. Okay, take the material with the pins in, upside down, or right side up. Press over. It kind of helps to press in the fold and the crease. Press everything out, get it all even. Then I flip it over, and then you take one edge and just about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, you fold that over, press it down, and get that crease in there. It just really makes it easier to work with. Then you're going to take the bottom, pull it up right to the edge, and press again. Now I like to get a nice good crease in this bottom, and you'll see why when we sew. Okay. Okay, there's another piece that you have to cut, and that's the piece that we put down here on the end. And that's an easy little piece. It's 2.5 inches by 2.5. And the other way, it's 4.5 inches. Now, because I did this little piece here, I have to cut that off first. And then you just cut 2 pieces of this. Now this one, you're going to cut 2 pieces for each mask that you make. Now, depending on your material, I found that most of mine, I was able to get 2 masks at the 9.5, 9.5, and then I had enough on the edges to do the 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch pieces. So you really have to look at your material, kind of figure out your material depending on how many masks you're making to begin with. It depends on the width of your material. The white material that I had was almost like double 60 inches, so that had plenty to do. Okay, so I folded my piece here, and I folded this piece. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. Okay, we're over at the machine now. Now I'm going to sew down these seams here and this seam here. So you just put this in the machine. You don't need to back stitch on any of this because it's all going to be sewn in. And this is the top edge where the pocket is. And the reason I fold this over is to help with if somebody wants to put a liner in there or something else in there. We've heard that putting coffee filters in there or other kind of filters will help to keep it safer also. And remember when I was ironing, I told you wanted to fold and get that nice crease in there for that fold in the down here at the bottom. I put a stitch right across that just to hold the pocket down so that when they're using it or it washes, it doesn't come out. So this is just a kind of a stay stitch. That'll keep the whole pocket together and intact. When you're done them, you want to take your material and you want to fold it over. Flatten it out. And then you're just going to sew up the side seams.
What about the little fold? Where is that?
You put the little fold underneath. Let me just show you again. Put the little fold under, put the flap over it, and then sew up the side seams with that in. That helps to make the little pocket. And I'm pretty much just using a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch seam, because that's all it needs. And then you want to do the same thing on this side, flatten it out, make sure you got it nice and straight. One of the reasons that we did this was that we were originally making these for nurses in an office, and they did have some kind of filters, they just didn't have anything to put in them. So you have your basic pocket. Here's the pocket, the little flap down, and then if somebody wants to put something under there, they could stick it underneath the flap here so that it holds it in place a little bit better. The next part is...
So this is Jodi now. I'm going to take over for my mother. She has a hard time doing the pleats, so I'm going to do it for her. I just want to show you, this is where the fold is, and this is the back. So this is considered the front, and this is the front piece. So when you do the pleats, you want to make sure they're pointing downwards. So you want the pleats to point that way.
To the bottom.
To the bottom. So the first pleat, now you want to have 3 pleats on each side. So you want to make sure that you can fit 3 in on each side. I don't have a specific size. You're just going to have to try it and see how many. Now, I found that if I do the corresponding side at the same time, it makes it a lot easier to do the pleat. And a lot of times I'll check. I'll put each side up and make sure that I have the same amount of pleat on each side. Okay, so that's 1 pleat that's done. So now we're going to go to the second pleat. The pleats are pretty small in order to get 3. Ow. Always pricking myself. And then again, I do the corresponding side. Make sure you're not overlapping your pleats. Make sure they're spaced separately so you're not causing a really thick material for when you go to sew it in the sewing machine. And again, I check both sides.
Your hands this way.
So there's the second pleat. So now I'm moving on to the third pleat. And again, I want to check the other side to make sure they're the same size, which they are. So that's 3 pleats that I have. And I usually make sure that the pleats range between 2 to 3 inches. I usually get about 2 1/4. My mom usually gets 3 inches, 2.5 to 3 inches. It doesn't matter as long as you stay within 3 inches. That way, when you have this piece, it's long enough. And that's it. And my mom will take over again. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back. So here's your nice folded mask that Jodi did. Jodi's better at doing that than me. Remember those tabs that we did? You're going to take one of those tabs and you're going to place it right side up, and you want to put the back of the mask on here. Here's the top here. This is the back. And then you're going to fold this over. Make it just as tight, nice and tight as you can. So this end I do about 3/8 of an inch. And you want to get started. Now I back stitch on this to make sure it's nice and tight. I leave my pins in only because it helps to keep the folds in. And your sewing machine should sew right over top of them. Again, double stitch there. Now I can take my pins out. And you're going to take this and pull it up and over. So you're going to pull the edges down, fold it in, fold this over, and then fold it down. And you want to come right over that stitch that you just made so it covers it up. And this is the front of the mask. And all you're going to do is just stitch it down. You're going to want to back stitch to make sure that you have a nice secure stitch there on the edges. And that's it. You can see you've got your nice pleats. Here's the top of the mask. This is the front. Makes it nice. Again, I'm going to take one of these pieces, print side up. This is the front of the mask. So I'm going to put the piece on the back. Bend this side over and pull it in a little so that you try to get it again as tight as you can. Back stitch it across there. Forgot to fold this other side over. So you got to fold that side over. Cut threads. Pull this out. Take your pins out. Again, fold this over. Fold the pleat. You kind of want to get this in a little bit so that it's not sticking out. And then down over top of the stitch that you just did. Then you're going to come down and just stitch that up. Okay, and there's your mask. Now, Jodi, can you hand me the ruler? The elastic we've been making between 9.5 inches, depending kind of on the person. We're doing a standard 9.5 inch. We're doing a standard 9.5 inch. Cut 2 pieces of the elastic. Now if you're using the ties, we just cut it. All right, I'm going to show you how to do both of these, depending on what you're using. If you're using the hair ties, you just want to get it in there a little bit on the edge so that it's in a little bit so that it won't pull out. And then what we did was we pulled got the set on the edge. Now this could be a little bit hard on your machine, so you want to make sure that you get it, help the machine along a little bit. I hold the 2 threads, which helps me to pull as I go through because of the thickness. I go up and back. I lift my machine, come over a little bit more, go up and back. And if you need to, you could do more than twice. You could go up and back again. But basically, there's my stitch. I have 2 stitches there, so that helps to hold that in nice and tight. Then I come over and I do the other side with that. Now with the elastic, I have these needles. You could use a safety pin and whatever you have, and you just put that through a little bit. Sometimes it goes through real nicely like that did, and then other times it gets stuck behind the material. So you may have to, in that case, I have another one that I use that just helps me to separate the materials so that I can get in there and get the needle through. Of course, it went right through when I first did it, but now it's going to be a pain. There we go. I pull this through, and then I just take the 2 ends tie a knot in the end, and you want to make sure that that knot is nice and tight. and as close to the edge as you can get it. And then you just pull the knot into the material. Now sometimes the knot needs a little bit of help. Just grab something, push it down a little bit, get it through in there, and then pull it from the other end. And that's the other side. So you either would do this, and we're going to take this off because we don't use these anymore, which would make it like this with the tie, or you have the elastic, whichever you're using. And there's your mask. It's all done.